there. It's for the thinkers, doers, sharers, do-gooders, creators, game changers. We're changing it, and it's changing us. Technology, it's everywhere, for everyone. It's building businesses and communities. It's our today and our tomorrow. Technology is not just an industry, it's changing industries. Join our fearless, innovative, engaged Tech Nation. The U.S. Chamber Technology Engagement Center. It's big.
Good morning. Really? Really? I was like, good morning. Okay, a little better. We got to bring it ourselves because the weather did not help. Good morning, I'm Suzanne Clark. I'm Senior Executive Vice President here at the U.S. Chamber, and one of the things that means is I get to welcome people to the building. So thank you for being here today. This building was built about 100 years ago to house events just like this that bring diverse business leaders together for kind of the advancement of the economy overall. Now, when the building was built, you're sitting in what would have been a courtyard, so we would have been very, very wet. But the events, and we run a couple thousand a year, quickly overtook the meeting space. So this had to be filled in the 70s to become this room. But you can see where originally it was outside. You can tell by the doorways. Anyway, welcome. We're glad you're here. So at the United States Chamber of Commerce, we wake up every day and try to think about how to create an environment where businesses and communities and workers can thrive. And this is a small and important and growing part of that work. And so our Senior Vice President, Tim Day, who runs CTEC, you just saw a short video about, is spending a lot of time thinking about how to bring together stakeholders on different emerging tech issues and bringing together business leaders from all industries. He's working very hard with his team to tell the dynamic story of technology in our economy and to bring tech and non-tech together, right? I mean, I'm starting to wonder how long we're even going to be able to draw that line between tech and non-tech, right? And so this new series that we've started, this TecExec Series, is really about that, right, Tim? It's really about bringing together companies you might not think of as technology leaders as examples of how technology is transforming kind of every industry and every family. And we couldn't think of a better way to kick it off than to talk about food. So like a number of other industries, if you think about finance or space, you know, there are issues where tech immediately comes to mind. And perhaps for a minute, tech doesn't immediately come to mind when you're thinking about food, right? But technology, as the people in this room well know, is changing how food is produced, how it's consumed, particularly how it's transported. And we're reaping a lot of benefits, right, from the cost savings and from fresher, safer food as a result. Now, a recent Morning Consult poll said, in fact, Americans do get this. And they were more savvy about the role of technology in food than maybe we would have guessed. The poll said that 79% of the public believes that technology benefits food production. This is important if one of our goals is to feed 9 billion people, right? So a majority of those polled also said that they were in favor of increasing cutting-edge technology in the role that it plays in agriculture. We think about things. People in this room, people in this city, people in the country think a lot when they think of technology about data analytics and about GPS and about drones and robotics and autonomous vehicles. And we've spent a lot of that work here in this room and demonstrated a lot of that technology right here to people. Today's focus on how all of those different forms of technology are impacting the way that food is produced and distributed and sold and consumed feels particularly important. And it feels like an important moment to seize an opportunity for even more innovation and make sure that we're promoting the tremendous benefits of that innovation. So this morning, we're really pleased to be joined by leaders from Kroger, my hometown grocer, since I'm an Ohioan, so, although I was a little upset when it stopped selling Bub's Daddy, but we can maybe have that as a side conversation, I don't know. But Kroger's going to talk to us about how emerging technology is transforming their business, but maybe most importantly, the customer experience. With nearly 2,800 stores in 35 states, under 24 banners, Kroger ranks as one of the world's largest retailers. And their innovation is changing not only the way we shop, but also what we eat. So in just a minute, I'm going to hand it over to Tim Day. He's going to come up and lead a discussion with Kroger's top tech team, Chris Jelm and Stuart Aitken. And then following their chat, my dear friend Leslie Saracen, who runs the Food Marketing Institute, will join the stage to have another conversation. Leslie also served as the president of the American Frozen Food Institute and has participated in the Agricultural Technology Working Group that helps advise the Secretary of Agriculture and the trade rep. So a very experienced voice we're lucky to have with us. So it's going to be a great program. And I think it'll help us think about farm to table kind of in a new way. So if you'll help me welcome everybody to the stage, we can get started with Chris, Stuart, and Tim.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Tim Day, Senior Vice President of CTEC, which is the Chamber Technology Engagement Center. CTEC was established to represent, as Suzanne said, not only the pure tech companies, but also the hundreds of companies in every sector that uses technology, from energy, manufacturing, healthcare, to name a few, and that obviously includes Kroger, who is featured today. As you will hear soon, technology is revolutionizing the food ecosystem, from how crops are planted and harvested to how we shop in the grocery store. Autonomous tractors and drones are beginning to be considered as essential farming equipment, and data from heat sensors to predictive analytics at the checkout counter are improving efficiency and having real economic benefits to consumers. Like Kroger, I am very proud to call Ohio home. As a kid growing up in Bellefontaine, Kroger was a grocery store that I would go to when my mother would ask to get milk and bread for dinner. So I'm very familiar with the store, and it's an honor to have this conversation today with Chris and Stuart.
Thanks for helping us.
Absolutely, happy to. And I look forward to discussing today a little bit more about what you're doing and the technology that's being created and used to create the modern and future grocery store. So before we begin the discussion, I'm going to let Chris and Stuart introduce themselves, and then we'll begin. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Chris Jelm. I've been with Kroger for almost 12 years, and I actually had a little bit of time outside of Kroger in the high-tech world at places like Orbitz and eBay, and spent some time at FedEx. So quite a few different industries. We've had a lot of fun at Kroger, and anxious to share, and thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely.
Man, that was a quick intro. Stuart Aitken, clearly not from Texas. From Scotland, I started out life as a lecturer. I taught artificial intelligence and small business management back when machines were going to take over the world. Oh, they are. I then joined Digital. I don't know if you remember that company, DEC. The Alpha servers, the first real data warehouses, and worked in their forecasting department. Moved to Silicon Valley as a programmer, joined Safeway. I ran their marketing strategies department, left them, became CMO at Michael's, the arts and crafts store, then joined dunnhumby USA as their CEO, and am now the CEO of 8451, a merger company with Kroger, and we can get into that a little later, Tim.
Very good. Thank you. And I will say we're going to end about 10 minutes before our end time to allow for questions from the audience. So as we're going through today, be thinking of your questions. So as Suzanne mentioned earlier, Kroger is one of the largest supermarket chains in the United States, if not the largest, and with 2,800 stores, 35 states, including the District of Columbia, 431,000 employees, 8.5 million customers. That's a lot of data. Chris, why don't you maybe give us a little bit more understanding of the Kroger history and some of the things you've been doing with the role of technology and innovation in your work?
Sure. Yeah, if you think a little bit about the history of the company, there actually is quite a history of innovation. We're 134 years old, I believe, and that's obviously a long time. But there was a lot of innovation along the way, and Barney Kroger, who founded the company, actually was one of the first people to bring all of the pieces together, so the butcher, the baker, all under one roof, so that customers could go to one place to get everything that they needed. You kind of roll the clock forward, quite a few decades. Kroger was the first company to introduce automated scanners. And automated scanners were pretty transformational. In fact, I think probably historically the most transformational technology for our industry was that simple scanner and the use of barcodes. And today, that was in the 70s. Roll the clock forward, 40 plus years, that still is fundamentally the way that process works. There's a lot more things we'll talk about over, the next, half hour or so that we've done, but a lot of it is, the complete digitization of the store. When we think about how do we serve customers better, we've, shortened checkout times dramatically through the use of infrared and predictive analytics. We manage temperatures proactively through the use of a network that we built and some temperature sensors that automate that entire process. So, a lot of it's behind the scenes that customers don't see, but there's this history of innovation, this culture that we've created, and it's been enormously fun to be a part of it. And one of the great assets that we have is a lot of data. We were also one of the first companies to introduce loyalty cards. And that loyalty card is used for a huge percentage of the transactions in our store. We know an enormous amount about customers, and it was the relationship with dunnhumby USA and ultimately 8451 and what Stuart and his team do that bring all that to life in a way that excites customers about their personal engagement with Kroger. And that's just a smidge of the history, but there's an enormous amount there. But I think the important thing is it's very much in our DNA.
Right. One of the things preparing for today I found really interesting. I believe Kroger used to go door to door and talk to residents and customers, which I think, going from that kind of a framework and how you engage with your customers to today, which is obviously a very technology-driven business. So it's a really, I think, interesting timeline of how you progressed, with the customers. Yeah,
and Stuart, you may want to share a little bit about that whole survey process and how we have really listened to customers for a long time.
It's just one mechanism we use, and we still use today, is surveys. And we talk to 45,000 customers every month.
45,000? Amazing.
And we have a great pulse on what the customer's thinking, where she's looking for us to go, what product services they're looking for us to deliver. And it's another data asset that we can leverage. And Chris talked about the digitization of the store. We look at the digitization of the entire supply chain. In fact, the panel following this will talk about the extended supply chain. But how do we start collecting data such that it becomes that much more valuable for customers?
Well, Stuart, I think maybe let's level set for everyone kind of what 8451 is and what your mission is about with the Kroger company.
I'm sitting beside my boss, so my mission should be, we'll get to that later. Yeah. But so 8451, I'll come to the name in a second because I know you're all going, what is he thinking? So we are 720 people strong, mathematicians, statisticians, PhDs, focused on the data Chris was just sharing. You think about a 134-year-old grocery retailer and you think about what's on the shelves right here. You don't think about hiring literally an army of people looking at the data, trying to understand the data and deliver unique experiences for customers. And that is our mission, is how do we deliver what customers are looking for? If you look at some of the products that are on that shelf right there, something like Simple Truth, what customers were telling us is they were looking for natural and organic products. That is one of the fastest growing brands in 2016. If you look at Kroger today, we sell over $16 billion worth of natural and organic products. And that's from the insights we help deliver. Our goal is to help make more and more decisions that are data-based versus instinct-based. And our goal is to help our entire organization, whether you're in the store checking out, helping someone work out that they need to open a new check lane because we've just had a huge influx of customers walking into the store, all the way up to our CEO and chairman, help make better decisions based on the data.
Very good. So with 2,800 stores in the United States, IoT is obviously becoming an important part of how we run a business. Let's talk a little bit about that process of implementing IoT into your business and some of the goals that you see and some of the benefits of having a digitized business in those stores as kind of as you've described, a lab, I believe, right? And kind of a test ground for understanding your customers and your business better.
Yeah, we talk about this, capability that we have, and I think we're one of the folks in retail that are a bit unique. We have an amazing research and development team. We do everything from hardware design to the software side, and specifically if you think about IoT, probably 5 or 6 years ago, maybe it was 7, we had this issue with consistent execution of temperature, in our refrigerated and frozen cases. And if any of you have ever worked in a supermarket before, you'll know that occasionally, a compressor will go out, or you'll have an issue with the defrost cycle. And ultimately, as a consumer, right, that impacts food quality. Any of you have ever had ice cream with a bunch of ice crystals in it? Hopefully never at a Kroger store. But it's because it gets too warm and too many times and ultimately causes the ice crystals to form. We decided, we can automate that process. And we have rolled that technology out across our stores. We actually built the network that's used to connect those temperature tags, and we actually designed the temperature tags. Now, we outsource the manufacturing. We don't do that ourselves. The point is, we saw a specific problem, and we said we need to solve it. Well, we built that infrastructure, and there are other sensors that we'll hang off that infrastructure. But to me, the important point now is our associates that used to have to run around and check literally temperatures on thermometers don't have to do that anymore. And when there is an issue, when there is a compressor problem, we're notifying store management, we're notifying facility maintenance, so that they can quickly react to that problem and fix it before there is a potential risk with food safety or before there's a food quality problem. And for us, that deployment's probably, certainly at the time it was deployed, finished it about a little over a year ago, that was probably one of the largest deployments in the world. 2,800 stores, literally hundreds of sensors per store. And to me, it is a foundational element. We're doing things right now, and you mentioned kind of the infrared cameras, but we use infrared to track people coming into our stores, not at a granular level, right? But we want to know, did a family just walk in? Or did 2 customers that are independent walk in? Because to Stuart's point, what we then do is predict, and we're pretty darn accurate at predicting, but we have to train the machine. So you hear machine learning, but we have to literally let the machine help us know what is the pattern for that store. And there are a lot of things that affect the pattern for the store. What type of shopper? Is it a holiday week? So those things ultimately go into predicting, and we're really good at predicting how long that customer is going to shop, whether it's a Thursday night at 9 o'clock or a Saturday morning at 10. And then we staff the front end appropriately. So wait times that used to be in the 4-minute range, which is a pretty traditional retail, time, we now average, 30 plus seconds. And that was done with really very little to no incremental labor. There was some initial in the startup phase where people were trying to figure it all out, and we trained the system and get the team to understand it. But think about how that transformed the customer, kind of mindset about Kroger. They didn't actually know what was happening. They just knew that service got dramatically better. And we envision all of our service departments helping the associates execute in the store, from stocking shelves to knowing that there's a spill that needs to be cleaned up. We're going to leverage the Internet of Things, video analytics, infrared, and other techniques to kind of make all that happen. And to our point of view, the less the customers see of that, the better. But there's so many things we are doing that the customers do see, that they experience on a personal level, that helps them as well. So it's both operational excellence as well as just incredible, customer engagement that we try and package together.
I'm assuming there's a vendor element when you're looking at suppliers and how they control the quality before it even gets to your store as well. Is that correct?
We do. We constantly, and I think this is an area of opportunity for the industry, but it's how do you go back to, and the panel that comes after us, they'll talk a little bit about, how do we effectively start to understand at the field, not just where something comes from, but what were the conditions when it was picked? What temperature does it need to be transported at? What is the appropriate humidity level? So whether it's at the field, and hopefully the shortest path possible to our stores and to our customers, or whether that's through a distribution center and then distributed to multiple stores, you're going to see technology literally not tagged to an item level directly, but think of it more as a tote or a pallet, where we're going to use that data to continue to optimize the quality of product and the timeliness with which that product can get in the hands of our customers.
Think about the outcome of that from a customer perspective. If we're able to do that and manage that cold chain early up the supply chain, it means an extra week for those items for the customer. It means greater longevity for the customer. So all of these things are to try and change the customer experience for customers, to differentiate ourselves from competition. Chris talked about arguably the largest deployment of IoT in the world when the team did that. But it was with the objective of taking those individuals who would have to go check the thermometer across all of these refrigeration units and take those people to deliver a better experience for customers. Someone looking to find an item they can't find, don't understand a particular product, et cetera. The idea is, how do we take those individuals and change experiences for customers to make it more differentiated for us?
I mean, another point, and it's kind of tied to what Stuart just said that I think is worth noting. There are an enormous, if any of you have ever managed a store, there are an enormous number of activities, things that happen. Customer has an issue, there's a problem with a piece of technology, there's always something going on. The question is, what's the next most important thing, and how do you effectively make sure that that person that is supposed to address that knows that? So in the case, I gave you the example of temperature monitoring. We appropriately prioritize that because that's a really big deal, and we want the right people to know it and get it resolved. We also, when we built our network, we built using a technology, and not to get too geeky, but if there's somebody in here that understands it, but we built it with a protocol that's called Zigbee. And Zigbee is a wireless protocol. So if you guys think of Bluetooth in your car or Wi-Fi at your house or at work, Zigbee is just in that same spectrum. But one of the properties of Zigbee is it gives you very granular locationing. What that means is within a square meter, about the size of one of these blocks up here in the stage, we know where that tag is, that temperature tag. Or with a mobile device that we have in our store, we know. So the ability to take that data and then help make sure that if there's something that needs to be done in the store, we can also know what's the other thing that's right there in the store, or what associate is the closest to that customer that needs help, or that spill that needs to be cleaned up. So it's the speed and responsiveness that we can ultimately help our associates, make the right priority call, do the next best thing most quickly, that allows them not to just operate a great store, but to also meet the needs of the customers in the quickest amount of time.
And regardless of the industry or vertical you're operating in, the principles still apply. So what we look to do is capture that data, regardless of what the activity is, what the technology is, to be able to leverage that data for better decisioning down the road. Again, those principles apply regardless of vertical that you work in. Our goal is to be able to understand all aspects of a shopping experience, whether it's the discovery aspect, the shopping aspect, the buying aspect, or the reflection of that shopping experience, capture all of those data pieces to make that a truly seamless experience for customers.
You touched on it a little bit, but your name, 8451.
Thank you. Great point and great segue, Tim. So 8451. As we merged with Kroger, one of the thoughts we had was, okay, what do we do differently? And ultimately, we look at customers over time. We don't look at customers in single points in time. An example of that is, let's say you're buying a book online, and the particular website you're on might say people who buy this book also buy these books. Well, if I'm buying that book for my mother-in-law, trust me, I don't want to buy any of those other books. So the point is, how do I look at customers over time, not in segments of or one sliver of time? So we look at customers longitudinally. The longitudinal address of our headquarters downtown Cincinnati is 8451. And that is our name. Now, those who are astute here, and I know you are, would say, but Stuart, isn't it negative 8451? We've got enough things going on with the name to not put a negative in front of our name. So it's 8451.
Very good. So when you're acquiring other grocery stores and growing your business, what's the technology implications of that, and how do you bring that together in a meaningful way? Because some are smaller, some are in rural areas, some are obviously in cities. But what's the process of bringing those stores to where your standards are with technology?
Before you answer that question, can I just
absolutely
tweak what you said there, Tim, just a little? And only because I've lived it. And what I love about Kroger is the fact that we don't call it an acquisition. It truly is a merger. And we believe that there's as much coming from the merger company as comes from the scale of Kroger. Midwest company, good people, and that is inherent in the business. It's been there since Barney Kroger was there 134 years ago. It truly is part of who we are. So it is a true merger in every sense of the word. You look at Harris Teeter, our head of operations today was the CEO at Harris Teeter. So.
And so specifically on the technology side, I'll stick with Harris Teeter. They had a program called Express Lane, which was the ability to order online and pick up at store. They're actually doing delivery now in this market. Not every store, but they're certainly we're intending to roll that out. We basically took all the learnings from Express Lane and used that to accelerate the Kroger version of that, which we call ClickList. And combined, we're now in, I think, over 650 stores across the U.S. and growing very rapidly. The broader question, ultimately for us, is in order to effectively leverage our scale, we need to get those merged companies onto a similar technology platform. And each one's a little different because they all start in a slightly different spot. They each have different capabilities. We're in the process now of, we're working with Roundy's up in the Wisconsin-Chicago area and doing that integration. So we move them to our complete stack of technology. And to say that they're excited about things like temperature monitoring or our Q management system, we call it Q Vision, they can't wait. And when they come to our labs and they see the innovations that are in the lab, everybody raises their hand and say, can I go first? Right? Pick me, because they want to be leaders. And everybody wants to, be the first to show their customers some of the exciting things we're doing. But our intent is to get there as quick as possible, partly to the supply chain side. The quicker we can get their warehouse or warehouses to be, speaking the same language as the Kroger warehouses means we can start to leverage those warehouses for the benefit of the entire company, not just a specific set of stores. So in some markets, we have stores that are both Kroger and Harris Teeter in, the same geography. Well, until we get those warehouses merged, we can't take advantage of that. So there's a lot of, kind of blocking and tackling that allows us to operate more effectively as a corporation. And then there are a lot of things that people, like I said, are super excited about because they're tools and technologies that really help them connect with their customers and run their business, and they can't wait to get those.
Just to add to that, the ability of Chris to get that infrastructure in place helps the likes of 8451 help these organizations as well. And I'll give you an example of what that might look like from an assortment standpoint and how we use data in perhaps a different way. So every single one of our SKUs in the store, and we shared the story with Roundy's, and that's one of the reasons they wanted in faster, is every single one of our SKUs in the store has a substitutability score. So we have an algorithm that establishes how substitutable an item might be. So I'm going to pretend for a moment you are all a butter category manager at Kroger. And you have 10 SKUs. And I'm going to pick on a CPG. Land O'Lakes comes to you and they say, hey, I've got this awesome butter for you. It's natural, it's organic, it's going to sell off the shelf. What do? 9 times out of 10, you'd rank those 10 SKUs. You don't have any more space. You'd rank them based on sales and profitability and pull that last one. We would tell you that would be the worst thing you could do. What if that last butter was kosher butter? What did I just do?
Did you say kosher?
Thank you. My translator.
I've worked with him for a long time.
And boss.
Kosher butter, yes. What did I do? I didn't lose the sales and profitability of that item. I lost that customer. And what's fascinating about that exercise is it's not just the bottom 1 or 2 that is true for. There are niche items from 1 to about 4. It's when you start getting to 5, 6, and 7 that you start seeing copycats of 7, 8, and 9. Here's what's fascinating about that. Now you have to truly trust the data. You as a category manager are now going, hold on, I could potentially lose these big sales, but it's for the greater good. And these are examples of decision making that we're bringing to the fore that wasn't there before. And it's why the likes of Aroundy says, how do I get a piece of that? And we do similar sort of thinking across all the 4 Ps of marketing, so from a pricing, promotion, et cetera standpoint.
Very good. So Chris, with your background, you had been at we were opening the session today talking about tech and non-tech and how we were starting to see similarities and blurred lines between the industries and sectors. As you're now coming from what I would consider true tech play companies into the grocery industry, is that true to you? I mean, do you agree with that kind of philosophy, and what kind of things have you been noticing at Kroger in your position?
I don't think there's a part of the company that isn't, what they want or how they see the future doesn't go through technology. So whether it's associates and the automation of schedules with their smartphones so that we can match best with the demands of their families and what we need from staff at the store, to how we think about the consumer and shopping online and the mobile experience. I'll give you an example. That's relevant. I think we're in the 5 billion plus range of downloaded coupons. And we years ago took those coupons digitally and automatically load them to customers' loyalty card. It's a virtual card, but when you come and shop our stores, we automatically use those coupons for you at point of sale. And the growth of that has been just amazing. When I think about 10 years ago, or almost 12 years ago now when I started at Kroger, a lot of those technologies weren't really being thought about. And today it's pervasive. And I think a lot of it is the industry. We're at the speed of change in the industry. It's other competitors that continue to raise the expectation. But ultimately it's the customer. It's the customer that's saying, hey, we want to connect with you in a different way. We want things to be more convenient. This is what I want to pay from a price perspective, and I want to pay less. This is how I'd like to receive my order. I'm willing to pick it up after soccer practice, or I want you to deliver it to my home. And it's all those customer, demands, expectations on us that we have to respond to. And it's very much of a data technology-centric world. And we're trying to help the entire company get there. And we often talk about a lot of the talent that we need from a going forward perspective. You think about running a store historically. versus the talent that it takes to run it. Today I was in a store last week, and we're rolling the new technology out to our Harris Teeter stores, and they're getting the benefits of that technology. Well, one of the associates happened to have been around for a smidge older than me, but technology wasn't part of his vocabulary. And he was expressing his challenges with the new touch screen that we put in for point of sale. The associates that were the millennials and the young ones that were coming in the store manager said they didn't miss a beat. They learned that new system within a couple of hours. They were proficient. Where you had one of the older store associates who had done it the old way for decades struggled a little bit with the transition. And I think part of our opportunity as a company is I think we talk about having like 5 generations of people working in our stores. And how do we, both from a customer as well as an associate perspective, take everybody on that journey so that everyone ultimately feels empowered to and comfortable engaging with this change. And it's a lot of change.
We touched on it earlier a little bit about the technology and jobs debate going on currently and some of the philosophical points. And I think, Stuart, you had mentioned a couple that I thought were worthy of mentioning here, if you don't mind.
No, I think it's a great question, and it really does speak to where Chris is going from a customer experience standpoint. If you think about where technology is going and where most businesses are focused, it's on automation. It's reducing labor costs. But we want to do it with a very different mindset in place, which is how do I deliver a unique customer experience through technology, through experiences you might have in a brick and mortar store. And that truly is our focus. If you think about Kroger, 15 years ago, they were a $55 billion retailer. Take the 2 acquisitions out, and we're a $105 billion retailer. The store count remained pretty flat during that same time frame. Why? Because we focused on existing customers and delivering on unique experiences for those existing customers, thereby getting a greater share of wallet by delivering unique customer experiences. Customers told us they were sick and tired of waiting in line to get out the grocery store. When you're waiting 4 minutes, that's a long time in a grocery store. Down to 30 seconds, that's something I can live with. But the demands and the expectations of customers it's a hockey stick. It's beginning to become exponential. So think about things like the old school grocery look that you have right here versus what customers might actually want. Think about, I'll play a scenario for you. Think about credit rating. Why can't we tell you a nutritional rating on your purchase behavior? Some customers really care about that. We can deliver that. We have an app that delivers just that for customers. Think about, we'll take it a little further, and this will bridge nicely to the next panel, perhaps, but think about having a credit score around how far my goods actually traveled from the farm to my table. Well, based on your purchase behavior and us being able to track end-to-end how far those grows, we could give you an average radius that your goods had to travel from. So if that were important to you as a consumer, why wouldn't we be delivering that to you? If nutrition is important to you, why wouldn't we be delivering that to you? And so we need employment to be able to go after these problems for customers in store, being able to find product, but find it faster. Why wouldn't we have your mobile phone showing you how to find product up and down the aisle and put that list in order of the products up and down that aisle so you're not double backing, which, by the way, I hate. So how do you start making you're laughing because it's all the same thing. How do you make these things so much easier for customers? Chris talked about the coupons. We now, rather than you scouring through what are literally hundreds and hundreds of coupons online, we will sort them based on your shopping behavior. so you can find them far easier, and it's on top of the list. How do we make your life that much easier? ClickList, we can create a predictive shopping list so you don't actually have to create that list in the first place. How do we make these experiences fundamentally different for you, the customer, such that you pick Kroger every time? It's a share a wallet game. How do we help deliver against those day in, day out?
I have two more questions, so get ready for your questions from the audience. You touched on nutrition, and I think something that is an incredible story. At CTEC, we have been focused on data for good issues and looking at how data can be used, obviously for good and for a lot of different purposes and reasons. In the state of Ohio, Governor Kasich has had a pretty laser-focused take on infant mortality. And I think you at Kroger had recently have done a hackathon. And let's talk about some of the findings and some of how that progressed and how that came about.
It's a great point. You know, you were talking about employment. One of the big things Kroger's focused on is feeding the hungry and how can we help. And, you know, we've ran a number of hackathons around a number of problems we're trying to solve for customers. And we were approached by Cradle Cincinnati, whose objective is to reduce the infant mortality in Cincinnati area, which is one of the highest in the country, and asked if we could look at the data and help pinpoint some of the potential triggering issues. And one of the things we found was food insecurity is one of the big triggers for this. Now, there were a number of other pieces to that, but the data we have can help in so many other ways. So that was one example. Another one was just leveraging the data we have. UC Cincinnati, the head of oncology, came to us and said, listen, we have a predictive problem we're struggling to solve, and it was the side effects of some of these cancer drugs, and can food help with the side effects, and can you also predict what the side effect might be? And we got what was a 50% accuracy rating to an 88% accuracy rating in a 24-hour hackathon. So, you know, data is becoming so powerful. It's going to be able to impact so much in so many great ways. And it's stories like these that we love to get out to the communities to say, listen, Kroger's not just delivering you food to a shelf, but we're doing so much more. It's our way of attracting fantastic talent. Millennials are looking for companies that are looking to do social good things in the community, and we are doing just that. It's funny, hopefully when we first sat down here, you thought of Kroger as this, you know, big grocery store, and hopefully you have a different perspective of what Kroger actually does today, one in the community, but also to try deliver unique experiences for customers in genuinely new ways.
Maybe
exciting.
Yeah, maybe one thing real quick on the talent point. We need more technology professionals. We need more data scientists. We need more software engineers. And a program that Kroger sponsored, we've been the title sponsor, I think, for every year this program's been around, but we call it Tech Olympics. And it's done with an inter-alliance program, which is basically a high school-focused program to really get kids into the STEM profession. Think of 450 kids descending on a hotel in downtown Cincinnati for 3 days, 2 nights. They do hackathons. We do, mentoring sessions with them. We allow them to try and hack networks. We bring in the FBI to talk to them. But literally I think we're on like the 5th year of bringing that many high school students from all over our region into a place where we're trying to get them and their families excited about a future in technology. And to me, it's part of our responsibility to continue to not just grow the talent pool on a selfish basis, because we do need the talent, but it's also to help grow the community and to help develop these children with the right kind of skills to compete in the marketplace of the future.
Which is A great segue, the future. If you have a crystal ball in front of you, what are you seeing as the grocery store of the future, and what does it mean for the consumers for 10, 15 years down the road?
Yeah, well,
Good luck, boss.
I'll talk about my favorite. I think you're going to hear a little bit more in the next panel about different delivery methods, right? How do we optimize the supply chain? So whether it's autonomous vehicles or drones, the way things get to consumers is going to change a lot. To me, one of the most exciting things is what we're doing with data and what we're doing inside of the store. There is a project we've been working on for a couple of years, and it is in 17 stores now, and so you can go see it. But it is truly a completely digitized shelf edge. It's full color, it's HD quality, you can play a video on the shelf edge, and it's very cost effective. That technology is doing some pretty amazing things. I mean, you change all the prices in the store in literally a couple of minutes, and they're all 100% tied and accurate to the point of sale system. But what's more fun is taking some of the data that Stuart talked about. Let's say I'm a gluten-free customer, and this is in a lab, so it's not in the store yet, but it will be in the store. You'll be able to walk down the aisle as a gluten-free customer. Let's say your color is green. You can stand in front of nutrition bars, and we will be able to highlight on the shelf edge for you the products that are gluten-free. You have a nut allergy, same thing. So it is gamification on the shelf. You know, we've got this promotion, there's 200 left at this price. You can literally watch it go. There's now $1.99, $1.98. So this digitization of the store, this shopping experience that gets people to say, I want to come in, and it may be to learn about a product, because you'll be able to tell your story if you're a supplier about why that product is the best for a customer. We'll be able to take other data we know about a customer, whether it's health-related, beautification, you pick, but we'll be able to take that data and help the customer get the most out of what they want in our store. And it won't just be on the store, it'll be online, but to me, it's convergence of those worlds. And people love to look at produce. They love to look at the new products in the store. And for us, it's how do we create a shopping experience that truly is differentiated, but very, very personal.
Stuart? Very good.
He hit the nail on the head with the last piece, very personal. So whether you want it delivered to home, whether you want to pick it up at the store, whether you want the brick and mortar experience, it will be personal. I love stories, and Chris's example of the gluten-free example is perfect. Think about it. If you were gluten-free, you have to pick up that product and look at the ingredients list to see whether or not you can eat that. Could you imagine walking down the aisle and say, I just want to see gluten-free, and it highlights it for you? It's a different experience. I'm likely going to experiment with new products, different products. It's going to drive me to the store. It's a great way to change the experience for customers and make it truly personal. If you have a nut allergy, a big red X on that same thing, don't pick that up. We have so many kids today with nut allergies and the likes. We can help prevent some of these things. So how does it become truly a personal experience online, mobile, and in store?
Fascinating. Thank you. Questions? Yes, in the center here.
Thanks. My name is Andrew Mack, and I'm a Cincinnati boy. My name is Andrew Mack, and I'm a Cincinnati boy, so born and raised on Kroger. And I'm very familiar with the company. I know that you're talking a lot about the things that are consumer-faced, and there's so much that can be done. But the other piece is that Kroger is a big international company that sources from all around the world. 30 to 40% of all the produce that's grown in the global south never makes it to market, even after post-harvest loss, right? Lost, stolen, eaten by rats, goes bad, sitting by the side of the road waiting for someone to pick it up. And our firm is working on a kind of an Uberized way of getting that produce to market. I'm curious, where do you think of the future of supply chain? How is Kroger going to take all of the technology that its approaches, creativity, not just consumer-facing, but also facing your supply chain? And there's so much good that you could also do, given your desire to try to be a good community player as well. Thanks.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent question, and I appreciate that. We do a lot in our distribution network to ultimately find the shortest path. And in some cases, if you think about what we're doing with local, and we've done an enormous amount with local farmers, and how do we really connect the community? Because we are the community store, and we want to be deeper in the community. A part of what we're working on is how do we connect with those local growers and get their product direct to store? It doesn't have to go to a warehouse anymore. So when you think about the carbon footprint of that, we're really trying to think about the source as much as we can and shorten that supply chain. How quickly we move things through the supply chain, so whether it's from Chile and ultimately going to Cincinnati, which in the wintertime, that's about your only option. So we're working on and talking to different companies about transportation models that allow us to carve days off of that supply chain. There's a lot going on. We could talk about the supply chain all day, but I think it's an excellent point, and one that when we think about freshness of product, when we think, to your point, about shrink or waste, we've done a ton in that space, but there's so much more to do, and I think that's a great question that highlights the opportunity.
Thank you. One more? Dan.
Dan Caprio with the Providence Group. Thanks, Tim. Thanks for a great panel. Very cool, lots of very cool technology, doing lots of very cool things in terms of optimization. But just a question sort of related to all this data. What are you all thinking about in terms of cybersecurity at the strategic level, at the senior level of the company, across the enterprise to make sure that, because you're talking about a lot of data and a lot of end-to-end and things from farm to table to store. How much consideration or what are you thinking about in terms of how you're going to secure it?
Well, that could be a panel all by itself. We have an awesome head of information security. He's a former Marine, and he's a pretty special guy. Back to the question about mergers. A lot of those mergers sometimes don't happen as fast as people might want them to, because we're not plugging something into our network that isn't ready to be plugged into our network. We very much focus on the endpoints. I mean, if you think about all the IoT deployments we've done, security is first and foremost into that conversation, because literally it's hundreds of thousands of incremental endpoints that we've created over the past 5 or 6 years. Those are all top of mind for us on the security front. Like, it takes a village. It takes everybody working together. I think one of the biggest things we do is try and make sure all of our associates are educated. From a cashier in the store to the CEO, they all have different levels of risk and exposure, but they all have to be aware. And we really do work to make sure that whether it's a payment terminal in the store or it's a phishing email that's sent to our CEO, that we're thinking about every associate and what's their personal responsibility. We do a lot of things internally that we think are proactive to try and be different. A lot of people want us to talk about what we do, and we typically don't, because the second we talk about it, guess who? The whole world knows about it. So I think we tend to be a little quiet, but it is incredibly important, and I think the most important piece is it truly is all 435,000 associates, 440,000 associates need to be part of that village.
I'll just add one piece to that, and that is PII data, so personally identifiable information. That is in a separate area altogether. We do not allow access to that. So even although we have 720 folks analyzing data at 8451, a number at Kroger, none of these people have access to PII data. That is our crown jewels, and we will not, and Brian, the head of information security, will not allow that, and we are all on board with that. For us, that's the crown jewels. Our customers' data is critical to protect, and we treat it as such.
Thank you. In closing, before Leslie comes up with her panel, I just want to mention, you've heard the poll that we've conducted with Morning Consult. The results and the questions are online, and you can look at those at ctecintelligence.com. So with that, Chris and Stuart, thank you very much. Thank you.
Y'all ready? Sure. Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. Again, I'm Leslie Saracen. I'm the president and CEO of the Food Marketing Institute and a proud chamber member. And I have the pleasure this morning of having a conversation with three gentlemen who bring unique experiences to what's going on in technology and the food industry. And we've heard a lot already this morning about the store level experience and what's happening in stores and the kinds of things that are happening behind the scenes that actually affect what happens in the stores, all of which are incredibly important to those of us who are concerned about the store experience. But there's also a tremendous amount of technology and new activity that is being employed before you ever get to store level. So throughout the supply chain, there's lots of change happening and interesting developments. We are very fortunate to have three gentlemen with us this morning who are very much engaged in that process. First, we have Chris Courtney, who's the chief pilot of Measure. Next, we have Ravi Kanaganti, who is Director, Retail Vertical Market Strategy for Zebra Technologies. And last but not least, we have Burge Sigety, who is CEO of Bison Investments. And as I've gotten to know Burge a little bit more this morning, has even further involvement in the industry than might be obvious by his title and his company affiliation. I'm going to ask each of you gentlemen, and perhaps we can start with you, Chris, to do a little self-introduction and just explain generally what your company does briefly.
Sure. I'd like to thank you guys for having us here. So we're Measure, Drone as a Service company. My name is Chris Courtney, as mentioned. I'm a U.S. veteran, 10 years Army, 10 years Coast Guard. I was a helicopter pilot in both the Army and the Coast Guard, and have run aviation operations from here to Korea to Afghanistan to off the coast of Central America. At Measure, what we do, we like to say that we don't make drones, we make drones work, in really trying to leverage the technology to help out with various industry verticals out there to improve their business performance. It's a very complicated process. We work with a customer. We find what their pain points are, their requirements are. We make a selection on the aircraft and the sensor. We go about and try to collect the data and turn it into a useful report for the customer to enhance their business practices. We also have done some work a little bit in the payload delivery space as well. We've done everything from transmission lines, distribution lines, solar farms. We've done architect, engineering, construction, news gathering, and telecoms and cell tower inspections. So we've done operations in 22 states and internationally. We've done over 1,800 flights, and we're continuing to grow and expand. And this technology has just kind of really come to life in the last year and a half. The awakening was last year, and this year, this is kind of where things are starting to ramp up. So it's an interesting time to be in this space, and it's really fun. So thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Ravi?
So thanks for the opportunity. My name is Ravi Kanikanti, and I work as Director for Retail Strategy at Zebra Technologies. And Zebra Technologies is in the space of sector of EAI, Enterprise Asset Intelligence. So basically, we provide visibility into operations. So, and I think basically with a simple but yet a powerful model, basically it's a sense, analyze, and act. So there is a component of sensing, and there is a component of analyzing, and immediately able to provide the act piece, saying that, based upon what we are seeing, this is what you need to do. And we work in 4 different verticals mainly. Retail is, of course, one of our biggest, transportation and logistics, healthcare, and manufacturing. So with this visibility, organizations are able to do real-time decisions for the right decisions for the growth, and able to provide the customer experience in a retail setting, are able to make the right decision in the supply chain for improving their operations and providing that customer experience. I think so, and I think I'm very glad that I'm here. I met a lot of people from Ohio. I'm a proud alumni of Ohio State, so I think good to meet a lot of them. So.
Thank you, Ravi. Burge?
I'm probably the only one who's not from Ohio. I was a New Yorker, but I gravitated early in my business career to the South. Bison Investments is a 25-year-old venture firm in Tampa, Florida. And then my personal involvement and the way I got here is our family owns a 1,000-acre ranch in Pasco County. And like so often happens in an individual's life, we saw an opportunity to merge some of our business interests in the fund, which focuses on manufacturing in the Southeast United States, with the farm. And out of that came the creation of Frogmore Fresh, a 150-acre commercial blueberry farm in the middle of the ranch. And that has now become a showcase for technology and the effect that we can have at the farm. We've also had 2 spin-offs, which are particularly important for this meeting. The first, Fresh Chill Solutions, is a company that has created a working prototype and patented the beginning of the cold chain, which is cooling down, in this case, blueberries, but it applies to 17 other fruits and vegetables at the farm, and simultaneously feeding the data that product has now been harvested up to the cloud. The second spin-off, which is a patent for the cold chain and really the supply chain from the farm up to this wonderful Kroger experience that the previous panel talked about. And we don't know whether the consumer will want it, but we do know that all the business participants in that chain, whether they be the farmers, the marketers, the packers, the transporters, will all be very interested in the data that can be compiled and shared to make that market more efficient, and also to show ultimately the consumer where their product came from and how it was treated on the way there.
Thank you, gentlemen. And it's interesting to think about in the context of the cold chain, and Ravi, you and Burge both mentioned it. Those of us who operate in the Washington area have spent the better part of the last few years focused on the regulations that are resulting from the Food Safety Modernization Act, which we lovingly call FSMA. And FSMA regulations include quite a bit of new requirements for the food industry to be able to demonstrate temperatures throughout the supply chain. So it becomes really a food safety issue, but also a very heavy regulatory component of businesses that are engaged in the supply chain. Ravi, if you would start and talk to us a little bit about some of the work that you all are doing in that space.
Sure. So I think, as you rightly mentioned, I think FSMA is a great addition. I think already people are using HACCP, the Hazard Analysis and Control, Critical Control Point framework. So before I get into the details, I think there are 3 mega trends that are happening in the technology, which is actually helping in this aspect. If you look at the first one is the cloud technology. The second one is the sensor technology. And the third one is the mobile technology. If you kind of combine these 3 technologies, the mega trends, and add the machine learning on the top, then pretty much you can really track and able to make the right decision and give that information to the person who need to make the right decision. Sometimes you allow the machine learning to make the right decision in a fully autonomous mode, right? So with that, I think if you look at from a food safety aspect of it, starting from the agricultural produce or the cattle, you should be able to kind of monitor that. And in the cold chain, especially since you focused on that, the sensors actually help to kind of monitor two main things. One is the temperature, and the other one is the humidity. And the way the solution should work and is working, what we have rolled out is, it is able to kind of profile within the cold storage, what are the temperature zones, your cold storage, which is frozen section versus the cooling section versus ambient temperature. That's one aspect. The other one is that at an item level, you should be able to profile and say that this particular item will become, will be above the threshold. And so you need to be able to profile at an item level. So when you have a truck transporting, you have different zones within the truck, and you have different items within the truck. You should be able to do that. And through the sensing technology and the cloud and the mobile, you should be able to give that information, alerts saying that this particular item in this particular zone is not safe anymore, and able to provide that visibility so that, as we talked earlier, Chris talked about the supplier, quality. So then that information is given to the retailers or end consumers or the restaurant, in this case, to say that, hey, this particular item should be taken off the, so that the safety can be ensured. And from an ACT point of view, from a FSMA point of view, I think the emphasis is on collecting the data. I think it kind of, broadly can kind of broken into two things. If you have not documented something, you have not done it, right? That's one. Or the second one is that if you have documented it, this is the way you have done it. So you can't rely on a human being to kind of record it. And if you have these technologies, if they're automatically recording and documenting it and able to show to the auditors, the one is the compliance aspect, that is the first layer. The second layer is think about your brand, think about your customers, think about your consumers. You are able to confidently say that, hey, this is safe, and this is why it is safe. I think that goes a long way in giving the customer experience.
Thank you. Burge, what would you like to add on that topic?
Well, I think at the end of the day, you have to follow the rules, but you have to come back to the customer and what you want to provide them. So the focus that we've taken, and we're using all of the currently available techniques on the farm to assure that the product is of high quality and handled well. We think that by managing the cold chain and compressing the data, we're going to be able to deliver to the consumer, in the case of a fresh blueberry, about a week's extra life in their refrigerator. And I think everybody in the audience here has probably bought blueberries. Eat more, by the way, they're good for you. But you end up at some point in your experience with that little plastic container that you brought home, opening it up one morning and looking in there and seeing some mushy stuff and picking through it. And that always seems to happen much earlier than you would like. The reason for that has to do with the way the product was handled and managed through the whole process, up to and including in the store, where frequently some of the worst things happen to the product before the consumer gets their hands on it. And I think with the use of data, the store is certainly going to be interested in what happened before they got the product, but it may be that we can find out that the consumer is interested, and then that becomes a kind of a brand awareness thing and a demand, which raises it up in those categories that Kroger and everybody else is looking at, and whose blueberries or other fresh vegetables do they want to have in their store.
Well, let me just say that I'm sure it could be some things that are going on in the stores, but in my personal experience, it's because I put it in the drawer and leave it there, and then I go back a week later and expect it to be the same way it was I put it there in the first place. So, we all have consumer issues that we have to deal with at home as well. Chris, I want to talk to you a little bit about artificial intelligence in agriculture, and you're doing some unique things in the agriculture arena. We've talked a little bit about how technology is helpful in the context of food safety and food quality, but you're engaged even before we get to that point. Can you talk to us a little bit about your use of drones and how you're using them and what you're learning with them?
Absolutely. Before I do that, just by hearing all of you speak, I see a day where drone technology is at the very, very beginning of this process, and also where drone technology is at the very, very end, where it's possibly being delivered to somebody's house or neighborhood or something to that effect. What we've done is we've flown and scanned thousands of acres. And what we're able to do is use the technology by putting multispectral cameras on it, like the one that's actually over there right now, and basically survey and scan a farmer's field. And I think we all understand that various components of that terrain gives off a light reflectance. And with this technology and on that multispectral range, you can begin to determine the health of the crop. You can understand irrigation problems. You can also just collect information about the size of a farm that maybe a farmer would have to try to rely on satellite imagery that's old, if they're using that, or just by manually driving a tractor around the farm to do some type of crop scouting on that. And so now with this use of aerial technology, on call, on demand almost to that effect, you can collect a lot of information. I think it's important to note that with commodity prices the way that they are low, and the input costs have gone up, the adoption rate on drone technology in the farming space has been slower than I think what was predicted. As I just mentioned, those input costs that have gone up. With this technology, you can ascertain and determine, parts of your farm where you want to prescribe the right amount of nitrogen, or locations that the health is not so good, so that you can be focused on your efforts and the money that you spend to try to get the best yield rates that you possibly can get on your farm and what you're trying to produce.
You mentioned that, Chris, that it's the technology is slow for adoption. What needs to change to help that adoption happen more quickly? Is it something the industry can influence?
Right now, obviously, we're close to Washington, D.C., and we stay close in tune with our regulators, which is the FAA. For those in the room, and I don't expect most of you to know it, but there is a prescribed set of rules that we follow. The FAA views drones as an aircraft in the national airspace. And so to be able to use this technology for commercial purposes, they came out with a great set of rules called Part 107 that was released last summer. And so that allows folks now to go out there, folks to get a license from the FAA to go fly these aircraft. You're restricted to 400 feet. You're restricted to line of sight. And there are several other rules that you would have to adhere to, or you could get fined, or some other implications could happen to you. So I think as a restriction that we have right now is the beyond visual line of sight. I know the FAA is looking into this and working in it. That'll help out to kind of embrace this technology. I think what we do at our company is it's still pretty complicated. It's new technology, right? So you really got to have professionals out there in the field that can deal with the issues, whether there's a firmware issue, or what do I do with this data? I'm collecting enormous amounts of data that maybe the farmer in the field doesn't completely understand. And so you need almost a service provider to really help articulate that and explain it to the farmer. I think it's important to note also, it's like I think there's like 500 million farms out there in the world. And I think it's 84% of those farms are 2 hectares or less. And then, it's like 15% or even less than that, or 20 hectares or more. So, the farmers have to make choices, right? And it's tough when the commodity prices are such and the input prices are high. They have to be very understanding of every dollar they invest. They want to know how many dollars they're getting back on the backside. And so with the prices and the rates that they are, it makes it tough, to be honest with you. I think as technology comes along and prices come down in regards to that technology, and the ease becomes easier, and people just generally start to embrace it, you're going to see adoption take hold. So to get back to your question, was what can be done? I think we just need to stay closely in tune with regulation from the FAA side of the house, so I can expand my envelope a little bit to go fly and collect that information. And then I think naturally the market will slowly start to embrace and adopt it as the prices come down. As you all remember, when flat screen TVs came out, they were like $6,000. like now you can get a flat screen TV for like what, $200, you know? So as things get better, the prices are going to come down, and you're going to start people to see that they're going to realize what that return on investment can be with a small investment up front.
We're starting to see some payoffs on the automation. We brought a movie and the Chamber was very interested in our autonomous drive tractors. John Deere, by the way, is our partner. Up until recently, I think it'd be safe to say they had a far larger commitment to autonomous driving machinery than the Highline people you're reading about in the newspapers, who are now spending more and more for us to have driverless cars. At our farm, in pasture mowing, for example, for the cattle side of the farm, an autonomous drive tractor can do the work in about 30% less time than the old way, and we actually have an almost 30% saving in the diesel fuel, which is a huge input in American farming today, because of that reduction in time that the machine is running, with a much higher quality outcome. So I think we're getting there, but it does take somebody to take the risk, because we've taken a big risk at Frogmore, to put these things in. And there are truly unique things in the fresh fruit business that are going on there, to be able to gather the information to really prove to the world, yes, you can do this. We do have drones flying over our farm, by the way, not from your company, from another firm.
We probably need to fix that then.
And maybe we can.
Yeah.
We actually have a plant doctor who's starting work next week at Frogmore to take the information that we're getting from the drones and from the regular scouting and cruising to see if we can attack the problem areas that every farmer has, particularly a large monoculture like Frogmore, to make sure that we produce at a higher level and deliver a higher quality product. At the end of the day, that's where we're all going.
Right.
Ravi, what do you see for the future with the kinds of technology that your company is employing? What do you see coming down the pike in the supply chain?
See, I think there's a lot happening from a technology perspective and how we can actually modernize the supply chain. So if you look at the way specifically the retail industry, you know, if you look at earlier, store was acting as a buffer for supply chain. So anything that happens in the supply chain, no one will not know until the end consumer will not feel it. But today, the way I think earlier Kroger team rightly articulated, the consumers are demanding different things, saying that hey, I would come and pick it up at this certain time, or you please deliver at this time, or a lot of information that is needed. So I think supply chain becomes really the driver for a lot of things, and the buffer that store is gone. So whatever happens in the supply chain, the consumer can feel it. So that's where I think a lot of changes are being driven in ensuring the smooth supply chain operations. So the technology perspective, I think RFID is on the top of the line, where I think we strongly feel that this is the right time. I think RFID has been for a long time, but I think the use case and again to the point of ROI, there was already question. But I think with this new trend that is happening, we feel that RFID is one of the things that will enable the supply chain and provide the visibility. And
so
the second,
let me, excuse me for interrupting, but I'm curious from a consumer standpoint, do you believe we'll see RFID technology in the stores, and will consumers, and how will consumers actually make use of the RFID technology?
Like for example, from a food safety perspective, if you look at it, I think they are going to get this information saying that when they are buying something, there is a confidence that because of this technology enablement, they should be able to confidently say that hey, they scan the thing with a mobile phone, they should be able to get complete information about where it was produced, how long it is there, and how fresh it is, all those information there. So that is going to make a lot of difference. And then we have RFID tags or other temperature sensitive tags, right, from a technology perspective, which will actually change color, or which will immediately inform the consumer that, hey, look, this meat, even though it looks fresh, but it is not fresh.
So in much the same way that Chris talked about getting immediate notification that the chiller has gone down or whatever,
Correct.
You'll be able to actually look at the package and know.
Exactly. And if you look at even future further, the IoT technology is actually coming into the refrigerator at our home. So I think it will not be very long where the refrigerator items which are stored will alert your mobile phone saying that, hey, what you have in the refrigerator you should not be consuming, because the sensor actually notice something that is happening in your own home refrigerator. I think so. Already at a retail store, this technology is already implemented, and I think forward-looking retailers are already using that data. But I think soon it will come to the consumer at home.
Fascinating. Thank you. I'm curious, as we talk about technology throughout the supply chain, one of the questions that I always am curious about is how this technology is going to affect just the way we function and the way the supply chain functions. Numbers of people needed to work in the process, types of vehicles that will be used to transport. I mean, Chris referred to the use of drones sort of at the beginning of the process and then also at the end of the process. How do you see this affecting just our daily existences?
I think it's going to speed up how fast the product gets to you. If the thing we've seen, and I was an outsider to the ag community before we got involved in the blueberry venture and then started to have the spin-offs, the supply chain between the farm and the big warehouse is very disorganized. And there is no real ability at a macro level to look at the data on a B2B basis. Everybody tries very hard to move it along. There is a fairly long transportation line that it takes in America today, particularly I'm a New Yorker, to get the food from the farm into, say, New York City or to Cincinnati. And we have the systems available from other industries. The thing is, can they be quickly brought to bear into the food industry, one of the biggest places in the country, not at Kroger's level, because you heard about the fantastic things that they're doing. They're on their game, they're doing it. But we see a large amount of disaggregation in the chain between the farm and that point. That's really where I think the work has to be.
Other thoughts or comments, Chris or Ravi?
I just think we talk about user experiences, and the front side, like I was telling you about, should ultimately increase yield rates, reduce the amount of fertilizer, reduce the amount of supplies that are used to get us to market and get it out there, right? I think that's where the technology will end up. I think it's important to note from the, folks that are familiar with the technology adoption curve, the industry as a whole, from the drone space, as I'd say we're right in the middle of the chasm right now. You talk about, if anyone's familiar with crossing the chasm, where you had your innovators, your early adopters. The awakening was last year, and this year there's a shakeout going on within the industry of who's going to be around, what service providers are going to be around, what manufacturers are going to be around. There's a race on the software side of the house as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out over the next year. I do feel, and if you look at, you could trace back satellite adoption and farming practices, right? Where it started and where drone technology has started, and that percentage is pretty closely aligned to back in the days when I think the first satellite went up in 1972 that was working on the farming side of the house. And then from the user experience in the backside, we may be 5 years out before we're having deliveries, but I think it's going to come, and I'm confident it will. And you may be at your home and you're like, hey, I forgot to get, milk, syrup or whatever. I'm making breakfast in the morning, and you call up, and next thing you know, you have a drone that delivers it to a collection point in your neighborhood or on your street. And I see that happening, and I see the technology getting out there. I think it's hard for all of us in this room to understand that, but if you're watching it as closely as we are, and you're surrounded by as many big thinkers that are out there, you got to think 10 years ago. If you think 10 years back, right? I also tell people this, like, I remember when people were talking about the cloud, and we're like, "What's the cloud?" And then look. I mean, we live in the cloud from a technology standpoint. So you see all this talk about drones right now, and people are like, the paranoia is out there, and I understand that. But in reality, you look 10 years down, and it's going to be a different landscape, and it's going to be incorporated. And there are folks working to make that happen here in the United States. Because frankly, on that, U.S. is a little bit behind, to be honest with you. But it's for good reason, because I really strongly believe with what the FAA is doing. They're taking a rigid approach to make sure that the national airspace that we all use, I imagine there's 10 of you that used it to get here in the last 24 hours, right? You want it to be the safest as it possibly can be. And so that's what's going on right now in the industry.
So I think to his point, I think it's an era of convenience, right? It's basically what people are saying that, hey, I don't want to kind of go do this shopping for sake of shopping, right? Again, the technology trends and the whole supply chain improvements and the different business models are giving back time to people to do different things. That's one of the change that is happening because of the technology. And other thing is that we don't really look at a grocery store as a store to kind of go get the packaged goods anymore. I think if you look at the trend, that is where people are demanding fresh food, they are demanding prepared food. And I think, for example, even my family, when we say, hey, when we go to a restaurant versus Mariano's, and we prefer going to Mariano's because, hey, look, you get fresh food, then you can also do your grocery. So the whole experience is something like fantastic, right? And in that process, what is happening is consumers have a choice to choose between what they do with their time and how they would spend their time and what kind of experiences they are doing. So if we go to a Mariano's or Italy, you are actually talking to the chef and say, hey, how did you prepare this fresh food? What are the ingredients that are going on? And again, to the point of people are very aware and they want to make the right choice where the food is coming from. And because of this technology and the supply chain improvements that we are making because of the technology changes, we are able to provide the data. And I think that is going to make a big difference to the forward-looking retailers who are able to provide that information and make consumers make the right choice.
Ravi, I wish I could hire you to be the spokesperson for the Food Marketing Institute. You just made all of the arguments that we've been making for a while, so thank you for that. Chris, you talked earlier about the FAA and the role that regulation is playing in the part of the business where you're playing. Yep. I wonder a little more broadly how you view, any of you and all of you, how you view since we're here in Washington, the whole influence and effect that regulation and congressional actions, other decision making that's done here in Washington, how that's affecting what you do more broadly, and if there are things that you wish would happen that would make this go more smoothly in the context of the food regulatory process. I know we have some folks in the audience here who are engaged in that, and it might be useful to take this opportunity to share how you think that process could influence for the good what you're working on.
Yeah, first of all, if those are familiar with Steve Case in his last book, The Third Wave, he talks about the importance of whatever your industry is to stay in tune with your regulators. And we're fortunate enough that we're here in Washington, D.C. My regulator, for the most part, is the FAA, but there is an element even from the FCC side of the house, and there's a whole state and local piece that I won't address right now. But we take an active role and work closely with the FAA. I sit on the FAA's unmanned aircraft safety team because the principles that we have in our company and the culture that we push and that I push is safety first at all times. And so you could either, I think somebody had said something, you can either have a seat at the table or you're going to end up on the menu, right? That was mentioned in something I was at earlier today. I thought that was great. I feel like I want to make sure we have a seat at the table so that we work with our regulators and help them understand that. Because, my last job before I left the military, I was a budget officer at Coast Guard Aviation. And when you're working in this environment, it's hard to stay connected with what's going on out there. And so I know that the FAA values our input because they want to know what's going on out in the fleet. How are our policies, how are our regulations affecting what you do? And so, I want to help shape that, and I want to be a part of that. And I think it's important, ultimately, to help drive our industry. I don't know that there's not much more I can do to help or assist or change it any faster. I think that things are going at a pace for a purpose and for a reason. I know that folks like the FAA have gone through that. Everybody needs more people to kind of open up and do more research and stuff like that. But we're doing our role to help them understand what's going out in the field and trying to help the safety culture within this industry. So.
Any other comments on that?
So I think from our perspective, I think if you look at, from a U.S. Regulatory perspective, I think U.S. always takes a leadership position, and actually kind of whatever standards we have come up with, the world follows. I think we have a responsibility from that angle, right? So if you look at from a FSMA point of view, I think when we look at the broader mandate that they are asking, I think they are going to help the whole world really, because they're basically saying that, hey, look, I want to make sure that where the food comes, whether it is the shrimp coming from India or a fish coming from Japan or bananas coming from Mexico, you need to have that visibility. And they're making it mandatory to have that visibility so that when we are purchasing in US, we are responsible to make sure that the processes are followed there in those countries. So indirectly, I think we are actually influencing in a very positive way from that angle. And to further up, I think already the rules and are framed very well. I think it's a matter of implementation. Mm-hmm. I think now we need to make sure that the FDA and other regulators have enough funding and mechanisms in place so that they can actually start implementing what has been already a good framework of rules and regulations that are already in place. Now the thought process and planning is complete. Now we would like to see the execution enabled. I think that's the next step that we are looking forward.
Okay.
I think down at the farm level, what we try to do is compartmentalize the regulatory things that we have to do. Some of it makes a lot of sense. Some of it really makes very little sense. And my job in trying to direct our management is follow the rules, stay inside the rails, but try to be innovative in figuring out ways to make the reports and spend the time that you have to in a way that doesn't take your eye off of the ball of trying to produce a better product for the marketplace. In Florida, the most important regulator in our lives after food safety has to do with water. And we've tried very hard to do projects to encourage the authorities to come and study the innovations that we're making out at Frogmore, so that, as I think a leader in that industry, we can influence the trajectory of what the bureaucrats try to do next, to keep them down here on the earth with us instead of in some place where it's unachievable to meet the requirements that are out there.
Great. We have a few more minutes. Would any of you like to ask questions of the panelists? Yes.
Good morning. My name is Abiha, and I'm from the National Consumers League. Thank you for being here. Question about all this technology. I've heard about RFID decreasing, informing consumers about, the quality of the food safety, improving the supply chain so that food's in the hands of the consumers faster, the consumer experience. How is technology, and is there any innovation being done about the food waste that happens afterwards? Because about $165 billion worth of food is wasted in the United States every year. And how can this technology, what more is being done to address that? Thank you.
I would say the first thing is that I think that what technology is helping is to prevent that from happening. right? So the first foremost responsibility of the use case that we are as a technologist looking at is that how can technology help to kind of have the visibility into what's happening in the food, so that the first step is that the prevention of that. The second thing is that if that, let us say, from a when it comes to the retail store or to a restaurant, to kind of alert saying that, hey, look, this is going to go waste in 3 days or 4 days, rather than allowing it to die on the shelf, so that the retailers or restaurant can make the right decisions about how do we kind of put that either on a sale in with a big label saying that you need to consume by tomorrow, right? And make the right decision of either giving it to the community so that community can our soup kitchens can use it without getting to the waste. I think that is where the most of the technology is helping to prevent or to kind of use it at the right time before it get wasted. And then from a technology perspective, I think a lot of innovation is happening in that front. What more can be done is that how can we kind of lower, again, it's the same thing that Chris talked about, the cost of tags or the cost of the sensors. And I think until there is a point where the usage has to increase, then only the cost will come down. Or otherwise, there could be some more innovation needs to be done in reducing the cost of the sensor, reducing the whole technology aspect, because today the technology exists, but the ROI is a question for some of those technologies that exist today. So I think that is what we need to focus on.
I would just also add that Ravi talked about ways to make sure that we waste as little of food products at the beginning of the process. In those instances where there is waste, and there will be from time to time at the other end of the process, I know that companies like Kroger have begun to use that waste to create energy within their companies. And so I think that is going on considerably more than it has been in the past, to try to figure out not only how to eliminate the waste at the outset, but then also ways to use it so that we can then protect the landfills, et cetera, from being overloaded.
Yeah, and is this on? Hi. Yeah. I'm also from Kroger, and I know it's a little unorthodox to jump up from the audience and handle a question, but this is a really important point that I wanted to get the chance to weigh in on. And if I look at our Kroger history, one of the big things that we did now decades ago was to be a founding partner of Feeding America. And we took all of that food that was going to waste and we redirected it to hungry Americans. And we look at what we've done. We've donated 1 billion meals in the past 4 years. And we've also committed to being a zero waste company by 2020. And that's in our stores and in our factories. We've got 38 manufacturing plants. So we really like to talk about a world where we envision with zero hunger and zero waste. And the food retail industry has done an enormous amount of work in this space, and it's something that we don't take enough credit for, but I think that you guys should all know that that food doesn't just end up in the trash. It goes to hungry Americans, and we're really thinking a lot about how do we get what we need out of the food industry and our customers, but make sure it ends up in the right place in that. So we have relationships with the food banks, local food banks through Feeding America. So we do pickups and we do drop-offs. So again, it becomes a bit of a distribution question. That is one of the big things we see as an inflection point, is the frequency with which we can get the pickups and drop-offs back and forth to the store. But we have a one-to-one relationship across every one of our grocery stores, of which there are 2,800, give or take a few, with a food bank. One-to-one relationship. Every single store has a food bank. They know that person's name. They pick up the phone, and that food gets donated to hungry Americans. So again, to the tune of 1 billion meals in the past 4 years. So.
And to Jessica's point, this is something that is happening. Kroger is at the forefront of this, but this is also happening more broadly in the food retail sector. I am aware that based on data out of Feeding America, food retailers are the single largest contributors to the products that they have available to feed their customers.
They're involved with the farm, by the way. Actually, today and tomorrow out at Frogmore, Feed Tampa Bay, which is a subset of Feed America, will have volunteers who, this is their 6th or 7th time out, they're coming out and picking the lead blueberries, which are not machine pickable. And instead of using migrant labor, we use the volunteers. The volunteers' product is sold. It's a saleable product, but the farm also makes an in-kind contribution of money to feed Tampa Bay. They get all the food they need from Kroger and these other fantastic companies that help them, but they also have a need for money at the food bank so that they can distribute the product and have their own staff. Some, I think, 300 people in the Tampa Bay.
No, I think you brought up a very important point. Something else comes to my mind is that there is a startup in India. I think, as you know, in India, there's the weddings are a big thing. And a lot of food goes waste if you don't do anything after the wedding event is over. So the startup actually has come up with an app-based thing where after the event is over, it's wedding or whatever, so you can actually communicate via the app, and there is an Uberization of the people who will come and collect the food, and before it goes waste, goes to and feed the hungry people. So I think that particular initiative has been very successful. So to answer your question, I think that's a good, that comes to mind, where certain point you can't prevent from going to waste, but how can you kind of make utilization of that so that somebody else get benefited from the community?
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Please join me in thanking them.
Leslie, thank you very much, and thank you everyone for being here today for our inaugural TecExec. I will make a couple of points. The food that you see on the shelves and the grocery cart out in front will be donated to the theme that we were just talking about, so others may eat here in Washington, D.C. So thank you very much. Have a great weekend and look forward to having you at our next TecExec. Have a good day.